Over the 20-year history of the Battlefield franchise, there have been many great maps worthy of praise. Some maps become legendary, icons themselves of the Battlefield series and worth remembering for their balance, uniqueness, and special gameplay. This is the story of the best maps of Battlefield. Rotterdam was only one of two major urban maps featured in the entirety of Battlefield 5's lifecycle, the other being the phenomenal level known as Devastation. Coincidentally, both maps take place within the same city, before and after the German bombing campaigns. Devastation's few minor flaws usually related to its main base design, and unfortunately, Rotterdam took those to the next level. Aesthetically, the map is gorgeous. It is well lit, finely detailed, and possesses an exceptionally large surrounding cityscape, which in its own right is probably a technical marvel. The level mirrors the real-life location with great accuracy and finesse, although obvious liberties are taken for the sake of history and level design. The clustered, almost street-to-street nature of the map makes it one of Battlefield 5's close-quarters staples, with sudden engagements during frequent building clearing or among the objectives. And yet, several long-range opportunities can be found in certain locations, like the northern riverside, the canal bridges, or from the large, elevated train railway which stretches across the length of the map. These features bear a strong resemblance to certain past urban layouts. DICE's own commentary on Rotterdam refers to it as a spiritual successor to Battlefield 3's Seine Crossing with a hint of Amiens from Battlefield 1. Regardless of its own enduring popularity, Seine Crossing had major issues, and it's ironic that a map which was heavily inspired by it has the exact same problems. Let's address the greatest of these as we begin an overview of the map layout. Rotterdam is a 5-flag conquest map. All of these objectives sit north of the main bases, being set almost pentagonally as the terrain boundaries shrink. Because the battle is set along the main river flowing through the city and which borders the right side of the map, the space where you would normally see a faction deployment area opposite its counterpart is impossible. Instead, Rotterdam makes a rare, but not unprecedented move by positioning both teams' main deployments parallel to each other on the southern part of the map, separated by 4 blocks of buildings and 2 sizable canals. Each of these deployments contain 2 spawn icons, theoretically allowing for directional breakouts, and aside from the first deployment at the start of the round, it really does become theoretical. Despite visual appearances from above of plenty of space, the pathing options are minimal and highly exposed. Even during a normal, balanced round, it is easy to cut down players leaving these deployments. The far greater, more noticeable issue comes from the event of a full capture of all the map's objectives. This is a common occurrence on Rotterdam owing to its smaller scale and limited map terrain. The canal side deployment icons, intended to filter each team toward the C objective, leads through a single alleyway and toward a lone bridge, where enemies are usually camping and staunchly defending from nearby buildings. The main roads up toward the objectives, more so for the British team, are largely empty, and lead toward the A flag and its elevated train station, perfectly suited for bombarding enemies trying to approach. The German side fares only slightly better, as the nearest flag, E, does not provide the same verticality advantage of the train station. Nevertheless, the open field on the low ground and predictable bottleneck players must use to approach the point keep the team locked down. Each faction's ability to field 2 simultaneous tanks in this situation does not help matters, as usually a few hits from enemy rockets send them fleeing back to the safety of the vehicle resupply stations. A few stationary artillery guns in each deployment can fire toward the main map, especially on the UK side, but these can be sniped at and ultimately fail to break a standoff simply because of the ease of the defending team to quickly respawn and return to the high ground. Meanwhile, players on the big guns and the several others now sniping only reduce those actually pushing to break out. If such a contain occurs later in the round, squad rocket call-ins may be the only real way to change the situation, though that also depends on the ability of a team to capitalize on the impact. The base camp scenario of Rotterdam may not be to the frequency of Narvik, but it still is a menacing possibility, practically impossible to break out of, and ultimately one which ruins the map for a lot of players. It also just happens to be the same major issue which Battlefield 3's Sen Crossing had all those years earlier. The thing is, when it doesn't happen, Rotterdam is an otherwise excellent map to play. Going now through the map, the A flag is the train bridge, located just north of the British deployment on the map's western side. The objective radius is large, encompassing the station on the tracks elevated above and much of the surrounding ground level below. 3 sets of staircases lead to the point, 2 within the capture zone and 1 more just outside to the west. The latter is frequently underutilized by players, making it extremely deadly for sneaking up on enemies above guarding the more popular set. Train carriages line both tracks within the station, making for a close-quarters battle between the cars, but long-range opportunities are just as possible given the long sightlines down the track, as well as down the overlooking UK deployment and streets to the north. Fortifications on the flag mostly develop the ground level, where an ammo resupply station can be built, whereas the med station sits nearby the trains above. As previously mentioned, the high ground advantage, defensive cover, and long sightlines make the objective incredibly difficult to approach and attack from the UK deployment, effectively ending the game if they hold no other flags. To reach the B objective, one must go north from the train station. 2 city blocks sit between them, with a major road on either side. A smaller street cuts between them, while a few small alleys intersect along the way. The main landmark here is the White House, though I won't dare try to pronounce it in Dutch. It is one of the few real-life structures which survived the German bombings. The tall, elegant building contains the flag inside. Despite its size, access is limited to the first 2 floors. The capture radius extends well out across the road and onto the dock, which makes up the map boundary. Cover in the area is plentiful, with large supply trucks, trams, and numerous crates and barrels. When built up using Battlefield 5's fortification system, this point is one of the most defensible in the entire game. Heading back south, the C objective is the Courtyard. Located in the center of the map between the team deployments, it sits bordered by the canal streets and train overpass. A tightly clustered set of homes lock the flag zone within the open space inside. Gardens and small walls are usually the only protection unless built up with some additional fortifications. Sightlines overlooking the interior can be found from the staircases of 2 connected buildings going up to the 4th floors. While isolated from outside interference, multiple entrances in the form of buildings and alleys make it easily accessible and flankable. This point is fiercely fought over from start to finish, as its proximity to the main deployments and the nearby A and E flags make it crucial to progressing across the map. However, it can also be strongly defended, especially from the directions of the deployments, since players must usually cross the exposed canals to attack. The Ruins objective sits in the northeast area of the map, directly across from the White House. Here, the D flag lies within a block of buildings which has taken significant bombing damage. In a way, this point is remarkably similar to the C objective, as it is enclosed by tall buildings and the capture radius barely extends past them to the north. However, entrances are fewer and easier to watch and defend. Within the destroyed section of buildings, ramps to the upper levels can be found to provide a verticality option and access the connecting apartments. These adjacent structures are often a beehive of activity, ranging from cat-and-mouse chases, camping squads, and players getting ready to push the point. The apartment windows are also strategically important given the sightline advantages. They can observe the docks and the roads to the west, north, and east, as well as part of the E objective to the southeast. The E objective, the Willemsbridge, sits directly north of the German main deployment and is essentially their gimme flag. It encompasses an elevated section of road making up the western edge of the tram bridge. Atop, a few tram cars provide protection, but once these are destroyed, the area becomes barren and vulnerable to the apartment windows to the west and the train bridge on the north. A large area underneath is a parking zone, with a few automobiles to provide some cover, though it remains largely open. 4 entrances below allow players to predict and defend to an extent, especially when they are fortified. Additional staircases in front and 2 towers along the back dock allow access between the 2 levels. Unlike the train bridge on the UK side, this objective doesn't provide the same height advantage against the German deployment. Yet it is still heavily bottlenecked and difficult to break out in the event of a full capture. The steady incline of the road artificially creates multiple lanes to push the objective, which is greatly beneficial, since the western deployment point opens up into an exposed area, and the bridge to the sea objective is often hard to break if the corner building is utilized properly by the enemy team. All combined, each objective of Rotterdam is largely distinct and well distanced from each other. A health and ammo resupply station sit on each, sometimes making certain areas of the capture radius more important or predictable than others. Pathing options in between make for exciting and dynamic gameplay. You can definitely feel the inspiration of a map like Seine Crossing with the many bridge battles over the canals and close-quarters street fights. The intricate network of the houses and apartments definitely provides the Amiens vibe, and being careful to watch windows and sightlines when moving about is critical. The train bridge provides the dominant verticality advantage, but rarely one players should linger at for long. Snipers obviously love the sightlines, but the protection offered by the train cars dwarfs that of the empty streets below, making it highly trafficked by both teams and often contentious. As a result, getting shot from multiple directions while on it is to be expected. Vehicles on Rotterdam are few, being 1 tank per team, while a second will appear in the event of a full capture. A half-track and light transport are also available, but as they sit in the deployment area with no button on the menu to automatically select them, rarely get used outside of the initial breakout. Meanwhile, with enough squad points, teams can call in an extra artillery truck or super heavy tank in the form of a Churchill Crocodile or Sturm Tiger. Again, like its map inspirations, the playable armor almost always trends to a specific location. It is rare to see vehicles deeper within the city, moving along the canals or across the destructible stone bridges. Usually, it's a newer, less experienced player making this journey into greater danger, or less commonly, somebody of great skill taking light tanks up the side streets and even onto the sea point for hit-and-run attacks. But in most cases, the tanks stick to the outside main road which loops around the dock to the north. This is almost to be expected given the protection offered by the large structures on either side and the relative safety of the map border. It is also highly incentivized by the map's 3 vehicle resupply stations sitting along this dock as well, the only 3 within the level proper. Also as expected, the tanks stay in close proximity to them, firing across at the armor or infantry on the opposite side, and then topping up on ammo and the more important instant repair perk. Overall, the vehicles of Rotterdam rarely pose a balanced threat and fit very well on the map, regardless of the lopsidedness of the tank weight class. Well-positioned mines, infantry flanks, and cover from which to lob rockets and grenades tends to deal with any major advance. Moreover, the verticality of the train bridge makes them less effective near the respective A and E objectives, though this doesn't prevent them from firing into the enemy deployment if given the chance. Aside from the near impossibility of breaking out of the main deployments, Rotterdam's only other issue of note is the locations of certain deployments around some objectives. The D flag in particular has multiple spawn points placed in the open along the map boundary to the northeast. These are easy pickings for enemies along the dock and street, but also from the apartment windows near the point, making for often frustrating respawns. The B and E objectives also have their share of exposed spawn locations owing to the restricted space available near the canals. These are particularly noticeable when an enemy is capturing the flag. In what is a major surprise, most of the spawn points for the center C flag are really good, often placed within rooms and staircases of the adjoining buildings or across the street. In this, there is vast improvement from Seine Crossing's notoriously poor spawns, which sit within meters of the flagpoles. While Conquest is no doubt the premier game mode for the map, Rotterdam was adaptable to others with mixed results. When featured on Grand Operations, the Day 1 attack took place in the airborne mode, with Germans parachuting in, attempting to destroy 3 anti-aircraft batteries. This is no doubt an interesting and unique choice for an airborne mode, given the tight confines players must bail from and find a safe landing zone without hitting the water or the side of a building. Overall, it did work, with a minor inconvenience here and there. Day 2 found the German team pushing across the length of the train bridge in the breakthrough game mode. This was much more of a meat grinder, almost humorous since it would essentially be emulated in the grind mode later on. Some extra map area around the north allowed for flanking opportunities should German players make it safely around, but most of the time the battle slogged on until enough players started earning enough squad points and a series of rockets would allow a team to end the game one way or another, usually with a massive kill streak in the process. Other game modes would have their fans and time in the spotlight, but ultimately it was Conquest and Breakthrough which would remain the staples, while Grind remained a chaotic hit during its short run. Battlefield 5 had a considerably rocky start. Technical hiccups aside, Rotterdam was a beacon of detail and enjoyment when compared to many of its other launch maps, arguably becoming one of, if not, its premier multiplayer level. It's a shame then that a few lingering problems are present to annoy players, like some rough spawn points or the occasional building blocking a rocket call-in, especially the White House on the UK side. More significantly, the longer, almost unobstructed sightlines down some of the main roads seems to be yet another contribution from Amiens and can make pushing objectives a hassle. But the one which tends to dominate the conversation remains the deployment incarceration. It's evident that it was a predicted possibility given the multiple deployment icons, but they just don't have the intended effect because of the map border restrictions and canal terrain. Worse still, even though a main base change may have been possible for the UK side, the river on the east essentially prevents any alteration for the German team. The strength of Rotterdam's gameplay and level design usually supersedes these struggles, and the city prevails in heroic fashion through most rounds. The atmosphere, lighting, and cityscape is magnificent, and clearly pushed the graphical boundaries for gamers in the same way Sen Crossing did 7 years earlier. It is fun to destroy the stone bridges while tanks drive across, flank enemies by skimming the docks, or hopping the boats to quickly get over the canals. The pathing options are largely fantastic, and any verticality advantage is limited to a few floors or to the height of the train bridge, and in that there is considerable playstyle versatility. Despite inheriting arguably the greatest flaw of its predecessor, Rotterdam is cemented as one of the most popular and effective multiplayer levels of Battlefield 5.